Welcome everyone to our breakout room. Our topic today is bright trafficking to China in or of Cambodian women and girls, which is a growing phenomenon, especially during the pandemic that we have recently seen. So if possible, everyone, if you could please mute yourself while the presenters are speaking, that would be lovely. And should you have any questions for any of us, please feel free to either raise your hand and then we give you the floor, or you can put your questions in chat. And to start with our breakout sessions today, I'd like to introduce Saron. Jan, would you like to introduce yourself and the topic you're talking about?
Yes. Hello everyone, my name is Saron. I am the Senior Program Manager from Chab Coalition Cambodian. Chab is international organization that we were working to combat human trafficking in Cambodian, and also Cambodian has been trafficked to region countries such as Thai, Vietnam, and China. And recently, we also has many cases that we has been working with the forced marriage case to China, and I also will be the reason of the experience that Chab has been working with the forced marriage case to China. Thanks.
Thank you, Saron. Vireak, would you also like to briefly introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you, T. Good afternoon, everyone. Maybe from around the world or from Asia. My name is Chhun. I'm currently a freelance or independent consultant and researcher. Mostly, I did the research on human trafficking, and just finished a research with T about the bright trafficking to China, with engaged with many stakeholders in Cambodia, including the key stakeholder from government and the civil society, including Mr. Saron from Chab. So he is the key person for our research. Thank you so much, T. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Vireak. Just a very brief introduction of myself. My name is T. I am wearing two hats. So I'm working for the Global Initiative Against Transnational Organized Crime, an international NGO headquartered in Geneva, Switzerland. I am also the managing editor of the Journal of Illicit Economies and Development. I'm going to put in the chat later, which is an open access peer-reviewed journal managed by the Global Initiative and published by the LSE, London School of Economics. I work mainly on human trafficking projects, research projects and activities, which I could introduce later. But without further ado, then Saron, perhaps you would start with your presentation, and then we could take it from there. So I hope everyone could see my screen. Yeah.
Okay. No, I have the new new slide. This is my old slides.
Oh, okay. Then would you like to?
May I share the screen now?
Yeah, please share your screen then.
You see my screen?
Mm-hmm. At the moment, we see your Zoom background or from browser. Yep, perfect.
Hello everyone. Again, yes, I'm going to present about my experience that working with forced marriage case to China. My presentation today is the Cambodian bride trafficking to China. The China has, you hear me? You hear me?
Yes, please keep going.
Yes.
Yeah.
After the China applied the one child, one policy in force between 1978 and 215, the reportedly the lead to selective abortion by family seeking a son instead of doctors, creating significant gender imbalancing in the country. Given by Chinese men rich for wives, especially the rural area, the thousands of the women from Cambodian, Laos, Vietnam, Nepal, North Korea, Pakistan, and Myanmar are trafficked to China to marriage. Although some women traveling, knowing that they are to be married, and other disuse of the forced marriage. Of forced marriage. So the growing demand of foreign bride in China has created an emerging markets for trafficking in region. Cambodian women eager escape imprisonment like in rural village are entering the brokers married in China's men in hope for a more lucrative lives. In reality, many women find themselves deceived about their new living condition, with many restaurateurs in rural China forced to work in farm and or domestic helper. With some experience abuse, thousands of other women are recruited for factory job and find themselves the forced marriage to China. So you can see the new trend of trafficking to China. Some traffickers deceive victims by promising to find a rich husband to have a good job in China, and some traffickers who married to the Chinese man, they also came to the community by showing the modern appearance for trafficking victims. And some victims travel by plane in small group of 3 to 5 people from Phnom Penh of International Airport, and some fly from Siem Reap Airport to China directly. Because of the Chab organization working with the anti-human trafficking police, and we work in cooperatively with the National Committee for Counter-Trafficking in Person to report the trafficking case to China of forced marriage case in order to restriction of issue the visa for Cambodian women who are traveling to China. Because of the international airport are strengthened and Siem Reap Airport are strengthened, so it's very hard for the broker transport the Cambodian travel from international airport direct to the China. So we can see the new trend that the broker use by not using the flight anymore to China, but they use the travel by land. Especially they use the travel from Cambodian to Vietnam, and then they can apply the visa in Vietnam to China directly. But some Cambodian, they travel directly from Cambodian to Myanmar, and then they apply the visa in Myanmar to China. So you can see the trend that broker use in order to traffic the many Cambodian from Cambodian to China. But currently, the most of our
Cambodian girl traveling by land across the corridor of Cambodian Vietnam with syndicated by traffickers in transporting from the Cambodian border to the Vietnam. And while the Cambodian girl arrived to Vietnam, they also have another trafficker is the Vietnam also prepare for buying the ticket or train ticket or bus from Cambodian traveling from Ho Chi Minh to Hanoi. You can see the news trend between in the previous year and right now we can see the flow is a little bit changed from the fly travel to the land travel. This chart you can see by year from 2018 and 2021. You can see the exit gate in the most. In 2018, they use a lot of from international airport to direct to China. But from the last 2 years, the broker used for exit from the Vietnam border in order to transport Cambodian to Vietnam border and then across the Vietnam border to China. You can see the exit gate between the year by year. You can see the new strand of trafficking of forced marriage case to China. In order to identify the forced marriage case to China, it's very hard and complicated cases because China is not a signatory of Palermo Protocol. They not accept the international Palermo Protocol. So, however, the Chinese, they use the marriage law in order to identify the trafficking under the marriage law. So, very hard to identify the trafficking law, trafficking case in China. So, whenever we report the trafficking case of forced marriage to China, we identify that this is the trafficking, but when we send the report to the Chinese police, they reject this is not the trafficking case. However, you can see the local Chinese police are uneducated and doesn't identify the case of human trafficking case in China. Some police didn't recognize that China has the foreigner traffic to China. That is why we can see some challenging for recusing or for supporting the Cambodian girl who has been trafficked to China. Another way, in order to bruise the trafficking in China, should be kidnapped, buy and sell. So this is what has mentioned in the marriage law of China. So while if we want to identify the trafficking case in China, should be the victim has kidnapped or not kidnapped. So when we report this case to Chinese police, they said that for the most of Cambodian girls are not kidnapped by the broker. They consent to traveling with the trafficker. That's why we can see very complicated of identify the forced marriage case in China. However, is the Cambodian girl does not buy from one Chinese man to another Chinese man or sell from one Chinese man to another Chinese man, this is not identified as the trafficking case of the forced marriage as well. So we can see it very hard to identify the forced marriage case in China. So sometimes we also report to Chinese police that before the Chinese man, in order to get married with Cambodian girl, the Chinese man spend at least the $12,000 in order to get married with the Cambodian man. We also report to this, but the Chinese police also
inform us that this is only the spending for the transportation, spending for the flight, only for the Cambodian girl who the traffickers spend for the Cambodian girl traveling from Cambodian to China. Or sometimes they said that this is only the dowry, because some Cambodian men, when they get married with Cambodian girl, they also spend those money for the girl in order to get married as well. So that whenever we use this word in order to identify as the trafficking case, is not acceptable for the Chinese police anyways. So all victims, while they were identified only for the illegal migrants, not identified as trafficking case. When the Chinese police arrest the Cambodian girl, they just only identify the illegal migrant to China. And then they send the Cambodian girl to jail or to detention center for 1 month, 2 months, or 3 months, something like that. And otherwise, if the Cambodian girls, they have visa, but they live longer in the China, expire, their visa is expired, they will be fined around the 5,000 yen, around the 78.5 USD if their visa expire or they live for longer than their visa will be fined from the Chinese police. And most of the Cambodian were exported from Cambodian to China. Is the how we intervention to process of the recruiting the Cambodian girl in China. So we have very complicated the process in order to intervene to recruit the Cambodian girl from China to Cambodian. Normally for Chab, we accompany with the victim parent to file complaint at Anti-Human Trafficking and Juvenile Protection in Cambodian. And we also accompany with their victim parent to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Cambodia to file a complaint. So after the file complaint has been filed in Cambodian, the file complaint was sent to Cambodian embassy in China for cooperate with the Chinese police for investigation of the case, or searching for where the Cambodian where Cambodian women trafficked to. And however, for Chab, we also creating the connection, researching connection to victim in the China directly. So if we have the contact number from their family, we try to connect with the victim in China directly. So when the victim has the smartphone that can connect with the WeChat or Telegram, so our team try to create account, the WeChat account, in order to easy to communicate with the victim in China in order to provide the advice and intervention to reduce. However, we also provide the guiding for escaping from the abuse situation and seeking assistance from the Cambodian embassy, because in Cambodian embassy just has only the few city in the China, does not have the all province in the China. So sometimes it's very hard for Cambodian girl for finding the assistance from the Cambodian embassy in China. They're seeking for the traveling for a long time in order to reach the Cambodian embassy in China. So the most of the Cambodian girl report us that they have experienced, the majority of clients reported that they experienced violent abuse during their stay with their husband. So those type of abuse mean restriction of movement, some case being locked in the room and not allowing to communicate with other people or even though their family, but some they also experience physical, sexual, mental abuse and violence as well. So we also have some challenges for intervention or working with the Cambodian girl in China. So the location of victim is far from the Cambodian embassy. So sometimes in order to reduce, in order to provide the Cambodian woman with the embassy, we need to find where the victim location in China is. So sometimes we ask them to send us the landmark, or they can take the picture where they are, and then we can allocate where the victim is, and then we try to guide them that where is the nearest of the Cambodian embassy. They can reach the embassy for recusing, because even though we report the case to Cambodian embassy in China, but they does not have any the official or staff for traveling from embassy to reach the child, to reach the Cambodian girl where they are. Normally, the Cambodian victims should be traveling from their abuse, from their province until they reach the Cambodian embassy. We also introduce them that because some of Cambodian girls cannot buy the public transportation for traveling from their place to reach embassy, because some of their passport, some of their ID card also were confiscated by the trafficker. So while they doesn't have ID card or passport, they cannot use the public transportation in China. Anyway, what the Cambodian girl use, they can use only by hire the taxi. They can hire taxi from their location to the embassy. So sometimes they does not have the money to pay for the taxi in China. So our team also access by using the Alipay. They can pay for taxi for the Cambodian girl for traveling their location until they reach the Cambodian embassies. And however, we also have some difficult with the file complaint. So while a Cambodian girl, they escaping from their husband and traveling to file complaint at the police, at the local police. So sometimes the local police send them back to their husband, because sometimes they have the violence with the husband, but the violence is not the reason to get divorced in the China. Because when they report of the violence in China, only the violence is not the reason to divorce. So sometimes it's very hard for us to intervention to recuse the Cambodian girl, because some of Cambodian girls, they also has the registers of the marriage between the Cambodian man and the girl, Cambodian Chinese man and the Cambodian girl. So it's very hard for us to recuse, or hard for us to intervene to recuse them from the where they are abused and to reach the Cambodian embassies. So we also have some recommendation for my presentation. One is we need to board the transiting between Cambodian and Vietnam for prevent Cambodian cross border from Cambodian to from Cambodian to Vietnam, because we need to build and strengthen and has the training to the border police in order to identify the trafficking who Cambodian girl who transport across the checkpoint, international checkpoint from the Cambodian border to the Vietnam. And we also need to provide the training in investigation on transnational crime of trafficking in person for Cambodian police and also for Vietnam police in order to identify the trafficking case from cross-border trafficking from Cambodian to Vietnam. And we also need to exchange information and law related to trafficking in person between Cambodian, Vietnam and China. So it is very important in order to share or exchange information and law between the three countries in order to provide and protect the Cambodian trafficking of cases to China. And the parties shall not punish the victim of illegal entry or exit them from its territories. This means that it's the Cambodian girl trafficked to China, while when we identify he or she is the victim, should be not punished as illegal, but identified as the trafficking. So should we provide the support, legal support or investigation or other services are needed that they need to provide. And the person who has been identified as trafficking victim shall be formally repatriated by three parties in timely manner. It means that while when Cambodian identify the case and Vietnam identified this the trafficking case and China also identified, should be the three country provides and formal and mechanism for the repatriation back to Cambodian and still work on investigation in order to arrest the broker, Cambodian broker, Vietnam broker or Chinese broker, because for cross-border trafficking, not only Cambodian broker that can transport Cambodian from Vietnam to China, because we can see the mixed broker that use between the Cambodian, Vietnam and China. So three countries should be strengthened and support to one another and share information in order to provide appropriate service for victim of human trafficking and victim of forced marriage case to China. That's my end of my presentation. Thanks so much for your participation.
Thank you, Chen Saron. I think in the chat, Ruth has posted a question. Would you like to take it quickly before we move on to Vireak and my presentation? So
I think Thai would be good that after you finish the presentation and then we can answer any question.
Okay, yeah. I mean, that makes sense because we speak about the same topic.
Okay.
So Vireak, are you on?
Yes, T. I'm on.
Perfect.
So you can start.
All right. I hope you could see my screen.
Of course.
Perfect. So hi again, everyone. Our topic is also about Cambodia's trafficked brides because we have been looking at this phenomenon over the past 2 years and recently published a report on this. So from what we have observed and from our interviews, the number of women and girls traveling from Cambodia to China for forced or arranged marriages has surged since 2016. And then experience a further spike since the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic. The reason why we would discuss later and share later with you. So this is the topic of the research that we currently not recently conducted, and I've shared the link in the chat. So for those who come later, I would share again later. As for the study, so this is the overview of our presentations today. I would briefly talk about the background of our study, and then we move to the dynamics of underground bride economies, where I would hand over to my colleague Vireak, and then you're back with me for the COVID-19 impacts and some responses that we would recommend. Concerning the study background, this before we launch into the research findings, a key point to highlight here is that this study was commissioned, designed, and implemented in partnership with Chai Helpline Cambodia. So Chai Helpline Cambodia is a free service for youth and children in Cambodia who receives trafficking reports from callers. And one of our focal point is Sok Fei, who spearheaded the establishment of Chai Helpline Cambodia, which now receives over 1,000 calls a month from children and youth across Cambodia. And he was also our fellow in 2020 of the Resilience Fund Fellowship Program. So each year the fellowship has a different team, so please check it out at resiliencepfund.globalinitiative.net, where we give small funds to grassroots organizations to support their activities against transnational organized crime, including human trafficking. So Sok Fei and the Chai Helpline Cambodia collaborated with the Global Initiative in the research in order to better understand some of the trafficking dynamics that the staff have experienced by the callers. And last but not least to highlight is that the COVID-19 pandemic, as Saron also mentioned before, brought significant disruption to not only the victim assistance processes and capacity, but also to our research process, prevented some of the planned field work to Cambodian, which is the source or hotspot province of bride trafficking in Cambodian women and girls to China. And unfortunately, there were so limited interviews conducted with stakeholders in China and Vietnam because of the pandemic. Therefore, for the studies on stakeholders in China and Vietnam, the relationships and responses would then provide better insights into the dynamics in the destination and transit countries. This is also shaped by the needs of. So this research was shaped by the needs of Chai Helpline Cambodia, and at the center of it is the voices of the families and victims of trafficking, especially those who called the helpline. And it is also worth noting that the helpline received calls pointing to a range of various trafficking contexts. However, our research particularly focused on bride trafficking to China because this has been highlighted as the fastest growing trafficking phenomenon by government and civil society stakeholders engaged in our research, particularly following the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic. And some interviewees also noted that significant gaps in the understanding of this trafficking phenomenon still remain. Moving on to the dynamics of underground bride economy, Vireak, would you like to take over?
Yes, sure, T. Thank you so much. And then we can change. Okay, thank you. So regarding to the victim profile and the source of the province, because Cambodian women and girls who are smuggler and trafficker, like traffic to China for marriage, typically a group of people who living in the vulnerable social economic status and from the rural community that they are far away from the cities, which is a very rural and remote area. And typically, most women and girls smuggler or trafficker to China for marriage were in their age 10 or 20. However, a number of civil society organizations who participate in our research noted that the increased prevalence of minor, including the girl as young as 11 years old, so very young, ladies and gentlemen. And Chab, Mr. Saron already reported that since 2020, they received many cases of victim age between 14 and 16. They also noted that the age range of women target for marriage in China was widening overall, with the growing number of significant older women also being targeted by the broker since 2018 because of the demand from China, imbalance of the gender imbalance. They attribute this to growing awareness regarding the risk of being recruited for marriage in China, forcing recruiter to amplify the target age range to meet the demand in China, as I mentioned. And while bride trafficking to China occurs from the of all Cambodian provinces, But Kampong Cham is identified as the most common point of the regions, identified by many key stakeholders to the study and also the media. In bribe trafficking, target a number of regions in China, but particularly like same Cambodia, like the poor rural area in the south. And the destination province in China, based on our press reviews and the interview with the key stakeholder, include, sorry, maybe I pronounced the wrong name, but it include Nanning, Henan, Jiangxi, Guangzhou, and Xinjiang. So many survivors are unsure where they were taken to the China. Like Mr. Saron already mentioned it, that they need to take the picture from where they were. And let's move on. So, profile of the broker and the trafficker. So the term broker and trafficker normally often used interchangeably by stakeholder and civil society organization, and also the government, like including the media and those of the people who are working in human trafficking. This misuse risks blurring the line between arranged marriage and trafficking. So sometimes they use like arranged marriage, and sometimes they use trafficking marriage or bride trafficking. So the term broker refers to the intermediary who does not intend to exploit the client, and where their relationship with the client is more of the transnational or personal natures. The trafficker may provide similar service, but they also have the intent to traffic the person, to change the person with money or with a valuable value bride or something. And you think one of the main outline in the trafficking protocol, the Palermo protocol, this distinction between broker and trafficker can therefore often be blurry, especially when a broker role map into that the trafficker due to the circumstance in or situation factor, including greed, personal or financial motivation, making the challenges for investigations and also reporting from the police or from the key stakeholder. Sorry, there are typically a number of separate interconnected agents involved at each stage of the journey. Like in the slide presentation, number one is about the recruiter, typically Cambodian women. They are from the same community, same village, same communes, and they share disadvantage of social economic background, like poor, vulnerable, and as their traffic victim, as the victim. So some are married to Chinese men already, and to Vietnamese men or a lesser extent, flaunting their wealth and luxurious lifestyle, their rich, their high soul in China, so to convince or to persuade the victim to marry a Chinese man. Some not fully aware of the legal consequences and illegally of their actions. Marriage brokering is illegal in Cambodia, ladies and gentlemen, so not legalized. So number two is about the transporter, typically of the nationality of the relevant transit country, mostly most commonly is in Vietnam. So the transit point where many victims are transit and placed there, like the trafficker or broker placed the victim in Vietnam. And other type of the agent is married immediately, most commonly a Chinese national, and often meet the women upon they arrive in China. So they're waiting victim in China, tasked with the providing women with accommodation while waiting, and provide the food, contacting prospective husband, and negotiate for the bride price for money, how much they can sell or they can buy, something like this. And while networking appear to be relatively small, they are highly organized, from procuring forged document or to organizing and communicating between nodes of the network across the region, transit, and the destination country, ladies and gentlemen. So, T, can you move on? So about the recruitment strategy, recruitment mechanism. So they are very techniques, they are very good. So a trafficker use a rank of strategies and to recruit Cambodian women and girls to travel to China. A common approach in leverage by recruiter is to promise a woman or girl a job in China with significant salary, with a high salaries. So typically from like of $500 to $3,000 per month. So some are told they need a marriage certificate in order to access the labor market in China and also well-paid work in China, which is not real fact. And some traffickers were seen waiting outside and offering female worker higher paid job abroad at the several factory in Phnom Penh, including like during the COVID pandemic. So they are waiting outside and persuading that do not work in the factory. You need to go to outside abroad, China. So many work waiting for you with a high price, something like this. And traffickers also use the social media platform such as WeChat to advertise a fraudulent job opportunity to Cambodian women and girls, because they're looking at the social media and they see the announcement, the poster by the job announcement. So they are very happy to engage in those jobs. So other strategies include a promise of the good marriage and materialize in China, where a recruiter promise the family of bride to be a dowry bride, like typically of $1,000 to $3,000. And some are also tricked and sold by their family member. So some family member, also the broker or the trafficker, and relative, and also for the lump sum price. So payment was made either at the point of recruitment or at the point of marriage at China or something like this. Yep. T, can you move on? Okay, about the traffic route. The trend and the dynamic, because we have changed a lot. So the trend, the dynamic, and the route for women and girls traveling from Cambodia to China for married have changed over time. Mr. Saron already mentioned it, but I just make to back up what he said. And shifting between land and air route in line with the changing enforcement practice between Chinese, Cambodia, or Vietnamese. So between 2000, you see the graph, between 2000 to 2016, land route via transit country, mostly in Vietnam, were prevalent. However, growing enforcement at Vietnamese land borders and decreasing price for air travel, like it changed, like simultaneously throw many Cambodian women to fly, typically from Phnom Penh to in Cambodia to Shanghai or Hangzhou in China, because the price is too cheap, right? Not so expensive, so they can afford to buy the air ticket. And during this period, Chinese men also come to Cambodia, travel to Cambodia to find a wife. However, this declined after 2016, and particularly in 2018, regulation required foreign men, including Chinese men, return by air to their country of residence with the Cambodian women to pay a fee. So if you want a girl to go with you, you need to pay a fee. And from 2016 onward, due to the growing report of Cambodian women being trafficked by air, the Chinese embassy in Cambodia restrict travel visa, not to provide like a very easy visas issued to Cambodian women, while at the same time, Cambodian Ministry of Foreign Affairs enhance counselor screening measures by doing this have led to an increase in traveling over land again. So change from air to land. So again, and transiting Vietnam through informal route, either crossing the border, which is collusions of the corrupted corrupted border official, or using irregular migration channel to enter China, such as by swimming across the river or walking through the jungle, through the forest. So in 2021, overland route transit Vietnam's remain the most common route for Cambodian women and girls smuggler or trafficker of Cambodia toward China for marriage. One in Vietnam, so some of the broker obtain Chinese travel visa, not the working visa, but travel visa for Cambodian women who tend to enter China by air route. So they change the visa. One development which we would like to highlight in it is in 2017. You see the red ones. China began the construction of the tall fence equipped with the video camera. So along the border, highlight line and the movement detector along Chinese southern border with Vietnam and Myanmar. This construction was accelerated since the start of the COVID pandemic in March 2020, and it nearing completion along the border with Vietnam and receive little media attention. So because of they keep the new secrets. And while the full impact of the fence remain unclear, it is likely to disrupt overland route and could try a return to the use of official border crossing or to the renewed use of the air route. Either trend would hide or the need of travel document, either forged or a tourist visa. So they change a lot from the normal visa, from working visa to the tourist visas. And T, could you move on? So T, would you like to talk this, or I talk this?
Sure, I can take over if you want to.
Okay.
So thank you, Vireak. Vireak just highlighted the different changing dynamics and routes that have changed all the time due to internal factors, external factors, and so on, like COVID, pandemic, and so on. Now I would like to turn your attention to the coercion and exploitation dynamics. So here in this graph, you could see basically this is the victim journey throughout, starting from the vulnerable communities being exploited and until the assistance and reintegration afterwards. I like to highlight that violence can occur at every single stage of the journey. However, it is most commonly reported when the women were forced to marry the prospective husband. So since the recruiters commonly provide financing for the whole journey upfront, initially covering the cost of procuring documents, accommodation, and travel, exactly because of this, some traffickers in China then presented the travel cost as a debt incurred by the victim as one of the mechanisms of ensuring that the victim would obey and marry the husband. So many Cambodian women traveling to China on a tourist visa, as Vireak and Saron mentioned before, which only enable 1 month of stay. Therefore, within this 1 month, marriages are usually arranged or forced during this period. Where women and girls refuse to marry, traffickers commonly threaten to denounce their illegal or imminently illegal immigration status to the police, and also at the same time demand repayment of travel costs. Other women also reported that traffickers use violence and abuse, just like Chan Saron also shared before, to force them to marry. Some of them were even threatened to be sold into brothels if they didn't agree. And then once married, the women's movement is typically restricted. They are usually prohibited to leave the husband's house unaccompanied, prohibited from having mobile phones or using them to make contact with friends and relatives in Cambodia. Some stakeholders we interviewed also noted that the women can find themselves in repeated cycles of forced marriage, meaning they're taken away from their first husbands and children and married to a different man, often by the very same traffickers involved in original arrangements. Concerning the reintegration returning journey, some victims reportedly use social media to ask for help, such as Facebook and WeChat. They're seeking help from family members or even the Cambodian government and other stakeholders. So some posted statuses, photos, videos, and messages and voice messages about the situation. Examples is one woman reported that her daughter used WeChat back in August 2020 to seek help to leave China. So the daughter wrote in WeChat about her story that she was deceived and trafficked by the broker in China, included her home addresses in this post. 3 days after she posted in WeChat, the Cambodian authorities came to her mother's house to confirm if the post was true. The mother then went to Phnom Penh to file a complaint. The police and then government engaged with the Cambodian embassy and the Chinese government and police to help the daughter, who could then return to Cambodia. And now she is working with an NGO in Phnom Penh. Adding to the challenges that Chan shared with you earlier, so some of the challenges remain with the local Chinese police, who have been reported to have returned escapees to their husband families and advise women to address their domestic grievances instead of supporting them. So when they encounter such a case, like occasionally they treat it as a family issues, like the husband and wife are not getting along together, instead of saying that this is a trafficking victim, so they return the woman back to the husband's family. In other cases, the Chinese police have also detained Cambodian trafficking victims for periods of between 3 months to 1 year because they overstayed their visa or they failed to provide legal identity and residence documents upon inspections. So this is what I would like to highlight from the very beginning, why the cases are increasing. One of the reasons why is because at the beginning of the pandemic, the Chinese police were reported to have increased their inspections. They went from house to house in these local destination like regions in China and check for pupils' legal documents. So following the inspection, they found quite a lot of women who did not have legal visa, for example, and they returned them back to the last country of transit, most commonly Vietnam. So trafficked victims, they usually deported together in large groups, even thousands of people suddenly being sent back to Vietnam to the border with the other irregular migrants without proper screening, and thus making it really difficult for both the Vietnamese or Chinese police or border guards to identify whether this is a trafficking case or just a irregular migrant being sent back. Also, adding to the problems is in Vietnam, unfortunately, there is no available regulatory framework for the provision of support to foreign victims trafficked through Vietnam. So if they traffic in Vietnam, they provide support, but if Vietnam is just a transit country, there's no support regulated by law. Therefore, this has put a lot of financial strain and burden to the NGOs based in Vietnam, such as Blue Dragon, who usually provide emergency support to these victims using their own money or financial means, including accommodation and food during the police investigation, for example, or including the transport fees of victims back to Cambodia. And these processes can then take months. The challenges are therefore patchy support from authorities and effective screening at the borders when people are sent back in large numbers, victim identification, as Saron mentioned as well, and also support like legal or regulated support from Vietnam, the transit country. Thus, it makes a significant reliance on NGOs in facilitating and financing returns of the victims. I'm going really quickly here. As for the COVID-19 impacts, I think Saron also share, we agree that due to the pandemic, there have been an increase in the vulnerabilities of Cambodian women and girls being trafficked. And even like the government, Chow Bun Ang, Secretary of State of the Cambodian Ministry of Interior, also reported back in December 2020 that the pandemic and the closure of the border had led to an increase in women being smuggled and trafficked out of Cambodia by brokers and traffickers for marriage abroad, most commonly in China. The NGOs that we interviewed for the research also identified an increase in bride trafficking from Cambodia to China since the start of the pandemic. For example, Chab reported that the cases of Cambodian women trafficked to China for marriage doubled in 2020, and same story for Blue Dragon as well. And I would just finish really quickly with the recommendations for responses that we have. So these recommendations are not meant to be comprehensive for strengthening the responses, because we did not, unfortunately, have the chance to talk or engage with the Chinese stakeholders much. However, our recommendations are mostly targeting the Cambodian stakeholders for the research or study. At the Cambodian diplomatic missions in China, of course, we recommend that more resources and training given to the officials in the embassies, and also so that they could increasingly identify or able to identify trafficking victims. Between China and Cambodia, we recommend that there should be a structured legal pathway established for legal marriages. Thus, we'll be able to monitor closely for any human rights abuses. And marriage brokerage services are currently unlawful in Cambodia. However, if we could regulate these service providers rather than prohibiting them altogether, it would then enable us a greater visibility over these illicit activities. In Cambodia, we recommend raising awareness, training women and girls in Cambodia, the hotspot, the source province, that, you know, when you like to marry a Chinese man, usually it's not a wealthy Chinese man, because those are the those usually are the men who could not find wives in their, you know, local country, local provinces or country. So they're usually from rural areas and poor and not wealthy at all. Or, you know, they should be also wary of false jobs or too good to be true jobs advertisements, for example, high salaries for unskilled jobs in China, like harvesting or domestic work. And we also recommend strengthening the criminal justice process. Last but not least, we would like to recommend strengthening the press coverage, because currently in Cambodia, the Cambodian media outlets have been not reporting fully of the incidents or phenomenon, and the repressive press environment, and in some cases the lack of understanding of the trafficking phenomena by journalists, would then hamper the effective coverage of trafficking dynamics, and thus create a culture of silence, which is not conducive to awareness raising, prevention, and detection. And with this, I would conclude the presentation and move to discussion. So thank you very much for your attention and following our workshop so far. If you could please turn on your camera, that would be great, just so that we have a more interactive discussion.
Hi. During the question, I found one question from Ruth from Plum. She mentioned that she heard Cambodian girl who came to the embassy and abused 2 months before he left for China. So for Chab, we doesn't have the case like that. We don't have any information like this. But what we have case is that during the broker transport her from Cambodian to Vietnam and from Vietnam to China, during the traveling, some Cambodian has abused or raped from the trafficker, while they're traveling with the trafficker alongside the border. So we had some case like this, but during the stay in embassy, we doesn't have any information about the case yet. Yeah, May, you can, if your case, you should be specific the information that it Chab also could be support on that side. Yes, thanks so much. Because Chab also has worked very close with the Cambodian embassy in China, Shanghai, Guangzhou, Beijing, and Nanning. That is the consulate that we has been work very close with them for transportation, food, and during the stay in embassy, embassy also provides some assistance support for the victim as well. So Chab also went to the embassy to work with them a while before the COVID-19 pandemic in the world. So thanks so much for your question. Yeah.
Thank you, Chan. I think Met New Laws also got a questions. Has your research shown any particular ethnicities as more vulnerable to others, or is it mainly the socio-economic background that seems to make certain people targets? Vireak, during your on-the-ground research, have you observed some situations where ethnic minority groups would be more vulnerable to being trafficked for forced marriages?
Thank you so much for the questions. To my research, because we met with not many victim or survivor, we just meet with the few from the support from Chab. Maybe Mr. Chansaran have a more clear idea, but depending on my research, it not related to mostly of the ethnicity or ethnic minority, but because of the poverty, because of social economic background that they are in needed of the money, in needed of the debt bandage, not that bandage, but the pressure, and also some kind of other climate change affected the area because they live in a rural area, which is mainly depend on the agriculture, which is impacted by the climate change, flood, or about the drought. So they have no work. So sometimes they move to Phnom Penh for work, but the work cannot provide more salary like I mentioned because of the brokers use the strategy to convince or to persuade them that they need to go to work to China for high salary to support the family and also to release the debt. Thank you so much. Saron, maybe you have the case from ethnic minority.
Yes, for Chab Dai, we also had some case for minority, but this is only the Muslim girl that we also has been working at the traffic to China. We have a few case for the Muslim girl from Kampong Cham and Thobok Khmom that we have a few cases that traffic to China for forced marriage. But we also have some case is the labor exploitation, but minority from the Ratnagiri. Yes, and it's not to China, but to Malaysia for the labor exploitation to Malaysia, not to China, but minority in Mandalgiri or Ratnagiri province. But for forced marriage, we have some case only for Muslim girl who were trafficked to China for forced marriage.
Thank you, Chan. If I may add, I mean, for our particular research, we haven't really had any data regarding the ethnicities, but we have discovered Cambodian is the host or the source province. So people or women from this province are more vulnerable or susceptible to being trafficked. Maybe it's also because of the location of the criminal networks, like they are more prominent in this province and proactive in reaching out to victims or potential victims. But for the other countries, like in Vietnam, there have been lots of research, for example, by Blue Dragon, showing that ethnic minority groups are the most vulnerable, like in the northern part of Vietnam, to being trafficked for forced and arranged marriages to China. So of course, there also have been evidence on this for other contexts or countries. We hope this answers your question.
The age, they have question about the victim age.
Oh yeah. Before that, I think, if I might, Chan, I think Inat, Tessa, Angela also asked a question if there is any research or data that covers bride trafficking to China from other countries. Yes, I think Blue Dragon cover Vietnam to China, and I think there should be some study for Myanmar to China as well, but I'm not sure at the moment the title of it. But of course, I think there have been research because this is a regional phenomenon. With the China one-child policy, it's created huge demands. So of course, the vulnerable groups of women's neighboring countries got pulled in. And then, sorry, Jan, you mentioned the age. Yeah,
yes,
what are some of the age ranges of the girls traffic?
Yeah. So for Chab Dai case, the most of vulnerable age traffic to China from the 18 to 33 or 35. It is the minimum age that we receive the case. But recently, the last year, the some minor also increase of trafficking as well below the 17 to 14, also the most vulnerable risk trafficking to China. So in the previous, the adult from 18 to 30 to the 30, 33 or 30, 35, something that, but last 2 years is underage, minor below the 18 to 14. Yes, this is many cases that Chab has been working with.
Yeah, so just to add to this, I think the age range is widening overall, right? Because the demand is still there, and some women are more aware of the phenomenon. So the traffickers, they have to search far and wide for, you know, younger or older victims or potential victims to recruit for this criminal activities. Any other questions?
Maybe we missed one question from Mosi Mudol asking about a specific government rehabilitation program for victims. Maybe because Bong Saron have worked with the Ministry of Social Affairs. So he can respond on this.
Yeah, so yes, for Chab we work very close for reintegration support, that we work very close with the Ministry of Social Affairs and Department of Social Affairs that we have been working with, because they always have recently the Ministry of Social Affairs, they also just signed agreement with the Chinese with the Thailand government for reintegration, repatriation, case management, repatriation, reintegration support from Cambodian to Thai, and also they very close work that Ministry of Human Affairs. They also has a minimum standard for providing the case or the survivor who are staying in the shelter for something that. So they have also has this program to work with. And Chab we also work in reintegration support for livelihood support, or the sending to the vocational training. So some of the women affairs in Breakout, they also has the vocational training for the survivor of men trafficking or rape as well. They work on reintegration and support for the client as well. Yes.
So thank you very much, everyone, for joining our breakout sessions today. We hope that it was somewhat helpful or informative to you and your work. And thank you, Jan and Saron and Vireak for co-presenting the panel with me. And I wish you all a great remaining of the conference tomorrow. I think this is the last session today. All right. Then I'll see many of you tomorrow then, and have a lovely day.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks you. Yeah, thanks so much. Yeah. Yeah.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.